It seems like it's been 40 weeks since you got 40 winks. Your back pain? Unbearable. Tossing, turning, trying to find that pain-free position. And that's the moment you realize you can't spend another waking moment putting off treatment.
The Joint and Spine Center is Cincinnati's leading destination for spine care, with a ton of surgical and non-surgical treatments for back pain. So when a moment has the power to change the rest of your life, go to the one place with the power to change it for the better, the Christ Hospital Health Network. This changes everything.
The Pound This Podcast is brought to you by the Christ Hospital Health Network. This is the Pound This Podcast, episode 569, How COVID Didn't Stop Carolyn Keating from Swimming the Ohio River and Raising $10,000.
I want to lose weight, but I don't know how to get started.
What should I meal prep every week?
How do I get those sweet booty gains?
Inspiration for your healthy lifestyle. The Pound This Podcast with Amanda Valentine.
Thank you so much for listening to the Pound This Podcast. I am Amanda Valentine. My guest today is such a badass. Has just what an athlete, and crushes everything she does, is Carolyn Keating. What an introduction, right?
That was pretty awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I've met you because we were both Flying Pig ambassadors here in Cincinnati, which is Flying Pig, for people that don't know, is like the biggest race in Cincinnati. It is an event. It goes beyond just being a marathon, half marathon, 10K, 5K, 1 mile run, the Flying Fur pet run, and the kids run. It is just like a 3-day event that takes over Cincinnati. And I mean, how many times have you run the pig? I mean, specifically the marathon.
I think I've run the marathon 5 or 6 times.
And how many just pig events? Could you even name how many pig events that you've done?
No, the Flying Pig half marathon, I think, was the first half marathon I ever ran.
Okay.
So, and that was back in 2007, 2008, something like that.
But you've done, I mean, how many marathons have you done total? Like outside of the pig, just in your life?
I got yelled at for this the other day because I said 20 something, and people said that's crazy that you lost count.
Yeah, it is.
But to my defense, I ran a 50K in December, and so that's over a marathon. So I don't know if you count that. And then I ran a 50 mile, almost 2 marathons. So does that count too? So I lost count.
So
but it's over 20.
What's the longest you have run in one period?
50 miles. I did a 50-mile ultra marathon through Antelope Canyon in Arizona back in March, before pretty much the day the world shut down. So it was kind of nice. I got to turn off the news and just enjoy nature for one last time before we had to all be quarantined into our houses.
Right. At least you got the last race in before they all shut down.
Yep.
And how do you feel after running 50 miles? Does your body just melt into the pavement? That sounds terrible.
No, it's not. It wasn't as bad as I was expecting. Antelope Canyon was a lot of sand dunes and slick rock that you had to climb. And so it was very different than running on the road. And sometimes that's actually better on your joints, so you're not as sore. Plus you slow down. So it's not like a road race where you're going after a time. Your goal is really just to finish. I honestly, I don't remember being that sore because I was so concerned about getting home. Because it was right when they shut down schools and they shut down international travel. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to fly back to Cincinnati. So I just remember getting up and getting to the airport and not, making sure I didn't have a fever because I had just run 50 miles and being allowed on the airplane. So I was sore, but I don't feel like it was any more sore than after a marathon, which is kind of crazy.
So how are you feeling now that every race has been shut down? Well, first postponed and now just shut down.
It's hard. I feel bad for the folks that are training for their first something, right? We have so many people that run the Flying Pig and they're running their first half marathon or their first 5K, first 10K. first marathon. And I feel for those folks, because the training that you put in and the dedication that you've like sacrificed over months, and then your races get canceled, is just super hard. I've had disappointments like that where like I've gotten injured a couple weeks before a race, and I've lived through it, and I know that there's something else at the end of the tunnel. And I've had my first marathon, I've had my first ultra. So I felt a little bit guilty that I got that race in and other folks didn't, which is why, I'm kind of getting behind a lot of these virtual races. I have a friend running virtual Boston this weekend, so I'm going to get out and run with her. I'm hoping I can run the virtual Pig. I think we have till the end of October to run that, and just supporting folks in those aspects to still be able to do their first, even if it's in a non-traditional way.
So what's your background? Like, what got you into running?
I actually was a college swimmer. So my dad and my grandpa are both in the Hall of Fame at UC as swimmers. And so I'm one of five. My older sister, Liz, she swam and went on to swim at UCLA. And then I started swimming when I was in 8th grade. And then I went on to swim at Bowling Green State University up near Toledo in Ohio. And when I finished, I was a pretty decent swimmer. By the time I finished, I broke some school records, and the competitive side of me like really needed to still be fulfilled. And my dad had run Boston, so he asked if I wanted to run a marathon with him. I'd gotten into like just running some 10Ks and half marathons, and so in 2008 we ran the Columbus Marathon together, and the rest is kind of history. He kept challenging me to qualify for Boston. So long story short, I trained as an arrogant college athlete and thought that it would be super easy to do, and it wasn't. And then he was diagnosed with brain cancer in 2016. And at the Flying Pig in 2017, 6 weeks after he had passed away, I ended up qualifying for Boston for the first time. So got to run Boston in 2018.
Yeah, that's
in the year of all the rain. So it was like a swim meet for me.
But that's got to be so awesome. I know your dad would be so proud of you to go to Boston. And in a year where you could actually physically go run it, which who would have thought in 2018 we'd be like, oh, thankful that we could actually do this stuff in person.
Right. My dad and I were super competitive, and I remember running Boston. It was the year, like, it was 30 something degrees, 50 mile an hour winds, like pouring down rain. And I just remember somehow the rain would pick up more and the wind would be like headwind right into your face. And I was just like, this is my dad. Like, just nothing can be easy. He still has to compete with me in some way.
So what's the story with your dad and the swim that you just completed?
Yeah. So in 2008, there was a swim that they started called the Great Ohio River Swim, which was a half-mile swim from the Serpentine Wall in downtown Cincinnati across the river and back, and it ended at the public landing. So it was a little bit of a V, so quarter mile both ways, so just half mile total. So you got to go with the current. And my dad was like, we're going to go do this. I was like, what? We're going to swim in the Ohio River? Like, that doesn't seem clean. I'm not so sure that I want to do that. But I usually went along with anything my dad said. So I went down with him and we did the swim. And it was great. The thing that I hated was they let the men start first, and then the women started 2 minutes after. So I had to swim around all these guys that thought they could, be fast swimmers down the Ohio River. And I ended up winning the women's division. My dad won the men's division, and I actually beat my dad. So he likes to say that he didn't even get bragging rights in his own family.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I got to ask you, because swimming in the Ohio River, my perception, that seems nasty. Mm-hmm. Like I've just stood on bridges and looked at the Ohio River. I've stood on the bank of the Ohio River, and I'm like, that seems like, like a branch would hit you, a car would, rusty cars, an arm, some needles. Like, I don't know, like if I'd like, or is that just like, if you're like downtown, if you go in a different section, is it, a little safer?
So the river is actually, so two things. The river, if you go east, outside of the city, or even west, it and get out of downtown, the river is beautiful. It, you have some great landmarks, and it's wide open. The riverbanks are really pretty. In downtown, you get a lot of the debris from the city, unfortunately. So the river looks worse when we get a lot of rain because everything rushes in from the streets. And the same thing's true when you go like up to Pittsburgh. So, we can say what we want about Pittsburgh being from Cincinnati, but like we get all of their dirt brought down the river. So when we get a lot of rain up in Pittsburgh, everything rushes in from their streets and it gets into the river. But the river, if it isn't raining, is actually really, really clean. Most people don't think that, but most people are used to getting into the ocean or lakes, whereas a river is just muddier. That's just the dynamics of the river. But every year for the race, they have a group test the water quality, and we make sure it's super safe. But the river quality for my swim last weekend, because we hadn't had a lot of rain, was like lower bacteria levels than what you'd find underneath your fingernails. Even with all the hand washing we're doing with COVID.
Well, yeah. And I mean, the race got canceled because of COVID, but it seems like, I mean, you're in water, you'd be able to distance yourself. But I mean, everything's kind of canceled in COVID. But you took it upon yourself of like, I'm going to go do a 5K in the Ohio River and raise a bunch of money, and did it, and like just kicked ass and took some names.
Yeah. So we weren't able to get any permits because we have to use the city park, and the city is just not giving out permits right now because of crowds. And so because of that, we couldn't get the Coast Guard to give us a permit to shut down the river. So unfortunately, we did have to cancel the river swim. And the river swim is put on by Adventure Crew, which is a nonprofit in Cincinnati that gets urban teens out in the environment. So you think about, kids growing up in downtown Cincinnati that don't have access to a lot of outdoor things. We get them out biking, kayaking, canoeing, hiking, swimming, doing all kinds of things that they wouldn't necessarily have the ability to do in their normal lives. And so Adventure Crew puts on the river swim, and they also put on Paddle Fest, which is a 12-mile canoe or kayak down the Ohio River every summer. It's their biggest fundraiser of the year. And just like the river swim, they couldn't get permits, so that had to be canceled. So they missed out on their two biggest events for the year. And I was sitting here thinking, these kids need to be able to get out. I have the ability to get out and run every day. I don't need a gym. It's been safe to go out and do that. And these kids in downtown Cincinnati, like, they don't necessarily have that ability. And if schools are closed, they're not getting the enrichment that they need. And so it could, funding being down, they may have to like cut programs. And they were trying not to do that. They're trying to continue the programs this year and just use smaller groups and be able to socially distance and do it in a safe way and still give those kids that experience. So I said, how can we raise the money that we would have lost for the swim? And we decided I would do my own swim because we didn't need a permit, and I didn't have to sign like any liability or waivers. I would just jump in the river and do it myself. And so that's where we came up with the idea.
And then what were your goals, and what did you end up with?
So typically the river swim raises about $5,000. One year we raised just under $10,000 because we got a donation from TriHealth. And so we got a $5,000 donation from TriHealth. So I said, how about we made it like a tiered approach based on how many donations we got. So the number of people that donated, as well as the dollar amount, I would swim a certain distance. And, being in the inner circle of competitive athletes that I'm in, I knew that I needed to put a cap on it, or else I may be swimming much longer than I would like. So my main goal was to recoup the $5,000, and then ultimately that would mean I would swim a 5K.
But you raised a lot more than that.
I did. So special thanks to Eclipse Camper Vans in Cincinnati. They are a new local business where they outfit camper vans. And they've been having a fantastic summer, fantastic year with everyone not being able to fly and travel. They're running out in their vans. So they made a very nice donation. And then Peaceful Monkey, which is a yoga movement studio in Newtown, which I work out with, they made a very nice donation. But then we had over 115 people make donations, and we raised just over $10,000.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
So
we recouped everything we would have lost for the swim plus some. It was the most successful year of fundraising we've ever had with the river swim.
So do you feel like every year you're just going to be hopping into the river now?
Number one, I feel super grateful for the community. My dad, the river swim is now named after my dad. And my dad created a great community in Cincinnati. And I feel it's on my siblings and I to continue that. And I feel like being able to raise $10,000 just shows the community that we've been able to continue to build, which is fantastic. And then I also had a lot of people reach out about, I shouldn't say a lot, I had a handful of people reach out about doing the swim with me this year, doing the 5K. But because of all the COVID rules, we didn't feel like that was safe and it would put Adventure Crew at a liability. So we're talking about next year maybe having a ultra swim, doing a 5K swim the day before the actual swim, where it would be a fundraise swim. So, maybe limit it to 10 people and they have to raise a certain amount of money so that we can get more folks swimming the 5K down the river, as well as get more funds back to Adventure Crew.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, what a great cause, too. I mean, I think a lot of people probably don't recognize that that's something that's happening in probably a lot of sort of communities other than Cincinnati, but specifically for Cincinnati, of just, especially in a year of COVID, like you were saying, of we're also stuck indoors in how we could just go out and explore nature. And that's something you can socially distance and do for these kids where they don't have that opportunity without somebody like them to help them. Of just what a great way to get more eyes and spotlight on such a good cause. I'm sure it's just going to be more and more prevalent. After 2020, our whole lives are going to be changed forever. So I'm sure more and more kids are going to need something like that. In a way, too, to make exercise not seem like, oh, painful, you have to hit the gym. Of like, no, you can be healthy and move your body by going for a swim or a bike ride or kayaking or any of these things that not, like you said, not everybody has access to. And so I just think it's awesome that you were able to do that. I mean, because I had no idea that was going on, that I just assume everything was canceled. I've heard of the Ohio River Swim before, but I'm like, I'm never doing that. I don't know how to swim. I have done Paddle Fest before, though.
Okay.
But where I was just, it's so funny, too, because I've deleted Facebook and all of this just because I feel like there's just a lot of crap going on Facebook, and I just happened to log on and check a message, and it popped up on my newsfeed that you were doing this. I'm like, oh my God, this is so cool. Like, I have to reach out to her of like, what can I do to like help you raise some more money? What a great cause. And just plus just being the beast that you are of like, dang, you just like don't give up. 2020 is like not going to stop you from running or swimming. And I just think that's a story that's so needed right now, where so many of us are just throwing in the towel and giving up because it's a brutal year to get through mentally and physically and everything else going on. That I just think it's awesome that you've been able to turn lemons into lemonade and do such an awesome thing. And I'm sure Adventure Crew is pretty psyched for 10 grand.
It is. I appreciate you saying that. It was a pretty cool experience for me because I didn't really think anything of it. I just was like, I want to swim in the river. Like, I want to do the swim. So it started a little bit selfish of me wanting to do the swim, but then it turned into something so much more. And like you said, there's so much negativity going on and people, pointing fingers at each other and saying that we need to change this and change that, but nobody's willing to actually like go out and do something. And I felt like this was a great opportunity to go out and do something that's actually going to impact our city, impact our youth, impact our future. And to me, the coolest part was how many people got engaged, like, and got excited about it. It wasn't just people in Cincinnati, and it wasn't the folks that donated $100. It was folks that donated $10 that, you know, they might be hurting right now because they've lost income because of COVID or whatnot, but they got behind the cause, and it's fired me up for the rest of 2020 to figure out how we can continue to inspire other people to go out and do it. And I hope it inspires a few other folks to kind of find their thing to do to impact one other person's life.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and just to ask your advice, so I'm trying to learn how to swim right now. Like maybe, hopefully a goal, maybe next year, like maybe I could do a swim like that. I don't know. We'll see. So as somebody who is going to the pool without having any swim lessons, because I can't in COVID right now, like what would your advice be to anybody that's a new swimmer or hear something like this of like, wow, I would like to do something like that, but I just know how to, you know, lay on a pool noodle and and drink a White Claw in the pool and doggy paddle around. Like, how do you actually like begin the process of learning how to swim like that?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with being on a pool noodle with a White Claw. That
right.
sounds drastic. I think the number one thing that I think is most overlooked when you're learning how to swim is knowing how to float.
Okay.
That seems really silly, but if you don't know how to float, it's going to be really hard to learn how to swim. And just knowing your balance in the water and being able to hold your balance is going to help a ton, especially as you think about what I just did in open water where you're dealing with current and, you know, sticks, things like that, that throws you off. And if you can, you know, learn how to float on your back, learn how to float on your stomach, then once you start adding in your arms and adding in your legs, it makes it a lot easier. I think the other thing is, and I've learned this a lot from the Peaceful Monkey Studio in Newtown, is just to be really patient with yourself and listen to what you're saying, right? So you may be going to the pool and watching everybody else, but like you may be watching me, and I've been swimming since I was 3 years old. So like, don't judge yourself off of somebody else because everybody starts differently, and be patient because you're going to make really small improvements. And over time, a couple months go by, you're going to be like, I wasn't able to swim a whole lap of the pool and now I can. And by next summer, you could be, you know, lining up with us on the Serpentine Wall, jumping in and swimming across the river. And that's a huge accomplishment. You know, important to just measure yourself and not worry about what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, because a goal for mine is I'm afraid of deep water. I don't like water where I can't touch. I'm really afraid of jumping into water. Like I jumped off this very smallest diving board at the Y last year and I cried, and I had a bunch of kids like cheering me on to jump like 2 feet. So I'm like, well, wouldn't it be cool to learn how to swim so I could try things like scuba diving and just, again, to like push myself where, jump off the Serpentine Wall. And like, that's to me right now, I'm like, oh my God, no way. But like to get to a point of doing that. And that's where, I haven't just tried floating. I mean, I had when I was a kid, but not at the Y now. Is there any tricks to that? Isn't it just like try to keep your lungs full? Is that the main trick?
Well, so your balance points, if you're on your stomach, like if you're looking at the bottom of the pool, your balance point is your forehead. So like learning how to like use your head to balance. And then when you're on your back, the same thing, but the back of your head, and getting your hips up so your hips aren't dragging. So thinking of like, I always used to think that there's a pole like right in my rib cage and like a teeter totter, and trying to find that nice balance piece of it. But you can also like use a noodle and start there until you start to feel comfortable just like being in the water, getting water in your face, knowing that you're going to get water in your mouth while you're swimming. Like just those little things. If you didn't learn that as a kid, it can be scary. And you have to get over that fear to make it easier for your swim.
Yeah, because I freak out about like whenever I have gulped some water with what I've been doing. I'm like, oh man, I'm just so I'm just tearing myself apart. Like, I don't know, it's classic behavior for me. But I'm like, oh, I just don't have this figured out. Sorry.
I will promise you this: when we're allowed to when you're allowed to bring guests to your pool, I will come meet you and teach you some stuff in the water.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, because I've just heard from so many people that it just seems like pool and water is a scary thing. So as I've been talking about this, I've just been hearing from a lot of people like, oh, I would like to do that too. But like, not only is it, I'm scared of the water, I'm scared to learn to swim. There's a lot of fear of just getting in a swimsuit I don't want to pick out a swimsuit. I don't like my body enough to get in the pool. And I'm like, oh, that is just such a bummer of like, that's something that you want to do, but you feel held back for all of those reasons. When that's why for me, I'm like, I'm just whatever. I'm just going to jump in and try to figure this out. And I know it's going to look messy and the lifeguard is on alert, but I'm going for it. And I hope that can, and just even hearing what you have done of not only doing it for yourself, but then to turn those kind of accomplishments where you can help other people, I think is just so amazing. Of just taking, something that's healthy for your body and exercise and not only your own accomplishments, but then be able to raise $10,000 so kids can get outside and exercise too. I mean, that's huge. And I just think that's awesome that you're doing that and that your whole family is, so involved and apparently just a bunch of like mermaids and mermen.
Brothers are that talented in swimming, but my sister and I definitely are.
Is she still swimming?
She is. She's done the river swim a few times, but she's pregnant, so she wasn't allowed to get in the river this summer, so she couldn't. One of my younger brothers, he used to swim in high school, and then my older brother played basketball, so I think my brother Jack and Paul, they just don't want to compete with us.
I mean, to be fair, I wouldn't either.
They did a live feed on Facebook of the river swim, and my brother Paul helped MC it. And so if anybody needs a laugh of sibling rivalry, I would recommend listening to my brother for an hour make fun of me swimming down the river. Right
on. So if somebody wanted to kind of see those videos or follow you or check out Adventure Crew or any of that stuff, like where's the best places to find you at?
Mm-hmm. So my social media, I'm on Instagram. That's Current Mile, and no spaces or anything. And then Adventure Crew is adventurecrew.org. And the Great Ohio River Swim is greatohioriverswim.org. And you can link to it, I think, all from Adventure Crew. And then Adventure Crew shared a bunch of stuff from the river swim, and I think the swim video is still posted. I don't know if I'd recommend watching the full hour, but they have some really cool pictures to show how beautiful the river was. We had the perfect morning for the swim. We got some really cool shots coming up to the finish under the bridges.
Well, awesome. Well, hopefully anybody listening to this, maybe we can make this a goal for next year, is that we can, hopefully COVID is under control and we're allowed to do these things again. And considering that happens, maybe we can all just jump in the river with you.
Yeah. And we the river swim typically we hold it in the end of August, and then we have a rain date for September. Given we depend a lot on how much rain Cincinnati gets, and so we have had to postpone before, but we allow anybody and everyone to come. We've had a woman in her 80s. My grandpa swam the river swim when he was 85, and we have some youngsters. If you're under 15, we ask that a parent swims with you, but we always, there's a lot of young people out there that, maybe will motivate their parents to go swim with them. So everybody's invited. We usually have over 200 people down doing the swim every year.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations. It's so exciting. And I can't wait to see what you're up to next.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
For info on health coaching and more, go to AmandaValentineBites.com.